In this video, we'll finish off with how our immune system reacts to antigens and take a brief overview of 6 topics regarding vaccination. Vaccines are immunobiological preparations that provide active acquired immunity for a particular disease. Essentially, it means that you're being injected with an antigen that causes your immune system to develop antibodies and memory cells. First topic is vaccination schedules. Some vaccines are mandatory and they are part of a vaccination schedule, while others are optional, generally reserved for people who visit areas with a high probability of contacting certain diseases. I'll only focus on diseases that are part of mandatory schedules for most countries. A vaccination schedule is a list of optimal times and intervals to receive vaccine shots. First thing you need to understand is that every country has its own base schedule. There are numerous reasons for that, and I will address them when talking about those diseases. The majority of schedules, however, are similar, so almost everything in this talk will most likely apply to your country in the exact same manner. Kids that require individual schedules will have to be consulted by a pediatrician, but there are a few principles tied to the base schedule. First of all, we vaccinate kids in advance to when they are most likely to contact a particular disease. For example, the first vaccine that's administered is hepatitis B vaccine, generally within 24 hours of birth. We do it this way because 1. It's very safe. 2. The most common out of the dangerous complications after birth is jaundice, which occurs as a result of a massive hemolysis. Hemolysis is a fancy term for saying erythrocytes, aka red blood cells, are dying. These kids may require blood transfusions, and blood transfusions always carry a risk of hepatitis B infection. 3. In babies and children, there is a very high chance of chronic Hep B infection as initial presentation. The immune system is not developed enough to fight off the virus at this stage. Should they come in contact with hepatitis B, they are going to be facing a whole lot of trouble. Second, in case of MMR vaccine, we use it starting from 1 year. The reason for that is because of breastfeeding. In previous video, I briefly mentioned that immunoglobulins type G can migrate through the placenta and also into breast milk. Maternal antibodies protect their children from a lot of infections, and it's been observed that giving MMR while breastfeeding significantly lowers its efficiency. Third, the interval we use to vaccinate. We already understand how our immune system reacts to antigens, but over time the levels of immunoglobulin Gs wane. Eventually, our immune system would stop producing antibodies. To make our immune response stronger and longer lasting, we need to move the peak production. In order to accomplish this, booster shots are required. These are given at a specific time, right as immunoglobulin G production passes its peak. Before the peak, the antigens would simply get eaten up as our immune system is in full response mode. After the peak is reached, adding another shot will put the antibody production into overdrive, resulting in even higher levels of immunoglobulin Gs, which will also last longer. To make effective use of this mechanism, vaccines will need to be administered at specific intervals. Most commonly you'll see a difference over months, but we'll cover this in depth later. Next up, we try to vaccinate against several diseases at once, and no, it's not a bad idea at all. One of the demands for newer vaccines is to be associable, aka giving us the ability to put more antigens into one shot. And there is no big mystery here, it's simply more convenient for the parents, for the kids, for the medical staff, and the vaccine manufacturers this way. As far as the immune response, it's been shown to be the same when dealing with one antigen or multiple, so there is no real difference. A common anti-vax argument is that kids receive way too many shots for the immune system to handle. What they fail to do is to put things into proper perspective. Each vaccine is either one antigen or one pathogen that our body has to fight off. How many pathogens do you think we come across daily? The answer is a lot more than that. It's estimated that there are approximately 10 times more bacteria living in our body than there are cells in our own organism. Luckily, we're not actively fighting all of them, and a lot of them actually help our body and even protect us from actually harmful bacteria. To put things in perspective, our body fights off billions upon billions of microbes daily. The amount of antigens provided by vaccines doesn't come anywhere near the amount of antigens we face on a daily basis. Topic number 2. Herd immunity. We've covered some basic mechanisms of how vaccines work on our individual immune systems, but another important concept of vaccination is called herd immunity. It's a very simple idea that's based on disease contagiousness. Our immune system response protects us as individuals, but the more people are immune to the disease, the fewer options the infection has to spread to others who haven't contacted it yet. By vaccinating, you not only protect yourself, but also prevent other people from contacting dangerous diseases. A typical example looks like this. These dots represent people in our society. The white dots are the ones that have no immunity. The red ones are infected, and the blue ones are immune. If enough people are immune to a disease, its spread will stop dead in its tracks and will barely affect the ones who haven't been vaccinated. If there are no immune people, the disease is free to roam around and infect whoever it wants. People who are ill quickly pass the microbe to others who are also not immune. The result is the situation we've observed with coronavirus. A dangerous microbe can quickly infect a large portion of the population. While we're at it, mind that corona is highly contagious, just like some of the diseases we'll be mentioning in our future talks. Now here's another example. Most of the population is immune to the disease. Assuming that someone gets infected, the chance of spreading the disease to another person is much lower. People who are immune have a very low chance of actually getting ill, and they also don't spread the infection to others as a result. The infection stops dead in its tracks, and it's unable to infect the population and cause a serious outbreak. I'll use corona as an example yet again, as most people have done a bit of research and heard some things about it. One of those things you might have heard is that corona will keep causing additional waves of outbreaks until at least 60 to 70% of the population is immune to it. This assumption is based exactly on the concept of herd immunity, and this same situation has been observed with Spanish flu. The virus kept causing trouble up until most of the population was immune. At that point, the virus could no longer infect new people effectively and disappeared. This exact principle is what caused Sweden to implement no real measures against the corona. While I don't justify their position of doing nothing about the global pandemic, I'm pointing out that this exact concept was the basis for their decision making. They decided to take no measures so their population could develop immunity quicker and get rid of the virus quicker. Topic 3. Types of vaccines. First, live attenuated vaccines. These are live weakened vaccines. Examples of those would be BCG vaccine, oral polio vaccine, oral flu vaccine, and MMR. The biggest pro to these vaccines is that they're almost identical to the real microbes, so they leave longer lasting immunity after very few shots. The downside, however, is that in immunocompromised kids, they can cause the clinical manifestations of the infection we vaccinate against. And there are often talks of how people who received oral flu vaccines actually got the flu from it. It's indeed a possibility with these vaccines. As for BCG, there is even a specific side effect called BCGitis, which is a type of infection from the BCG strain. 2. Inactivated vaccines. They use a killed version of the microbe, aka the one that cannot reproduce under any circumstances. Example of this would be hepatitis A, inactivated flu shots, and polio shots. Again, our body has to deal with the complete pathogen, except this one can't grow and multiply, thus excluding the risk of infection. The downside is that these shots are a bit weaker and will require more booster shots to create better and longer lasting immunity. 3. Subunit, chemical, and split vaccines. The gist of those is that they don't use the entirety of the microbe, they only include some antigens. These vaccines include pneumococcal, meningococcal, Haemophilus vaccines, flu shots, as well as a cellular whooping cough vaccine. These vaccines only provide good antigens to their recipients, so the immune response is generally very good, but they're still weaker than LAVs and will require additional boosters. Given how there is no microbe in any shape or form, they also can be used on kids with weak immune systems, as there is no risk of getting infected. While compromising on immunity a bit, these are the safest types of vaccines. Toxoid vaccines, aka anatoxins. These vaccines are made out of inactive bacterial toxins. In this case, I want to make sure we are not substituting words. I previously mentioned that it's okay for our talk to use the words toxins and antigens interchangeably. Let me make a slight clarification to this statement. Toxins are also antigens, but not all antigens are toxins. Toxins can have several antigens within them, a concept we previously mentioned as antigen sites. Generally, toxins are viewed as substances that microbes produce to damage other cells. It helps them kill off other cells around them to use as food and also fight off other rival bacteria. There are at least 2 cases where we have to make this important distinction: diphtheria and tetanus. In both of those cases, the microbe itself poses no real danger to our body. The real threats are the toxins that they produce. As a result, it makes no sense for us to use any parts of the microbe as part of the vaccine. If we want to avoid those infections, we have to use their toxins. Weakened or inactive ones are called anotoxins, and this is the gist of these vaccines. Since the toxins are the main threat and we're using inactive ones, they create a very good immune response. However, both diphtheria and tetanus can strike at any point in our lives, so it's optimal to always keep our antibodies at appropriate levels. For this reason, people receive many booster shots of DT vaccine. 5. Recombinant vaccines. For now, it's only the Hep B vaccine. Recombinant essentially means genetically engineered, and the gist is very simple. We use yeasts to mass produce a specific hepatitis B antigen so that we can later inject it and form immunity against it. Unfortunately, there is simply no way for us to extract it in an efficient manner otherwise. Topic 4. Quality control. It's honestly become harder than ever in Western countries to put any kind of new drug on the market. The amount of clinical trials required to establish safety, dosing, side effects, and finally release the drug is insane. Every drug that wants to go on the market has to undergo a series of trials. First of all, preclinical trials on animals to determine safety and viability. Then the clinical trials on people with their explicit agreement and an approval of an ethics committee. Phase 1 trials are conducted on a limited group of healthy individuals to determine the basic pharmacological properties. Does the drug even work the way it's supposed to? What is its volume of distribution? How is it eliminated? What plasma concentrations are effective, and what dose do we need to give so that we can achieve them? Since we're not here to study pharmacology, I'll omit explaining what those terms mean. You're more than capable of looking it up on your own in case you're curious. Phase 2 trials. A broader group of people who are at risk of contracting a specific infection is taken. Phase 1 trials help construct a schedule for vaccinating these people, and Phase 2 trials evaluate how well the vaccine performs in terms of preventing disease and creating immunity. Phase 3 trials are conducted on a large group of people with or without high risk of contracting the infection. These trials are mainly used to rate the effectiveness of routine vaccination on outcomes, such as lowering the incidence of a particular disease or its associated mortality. Also, rare side effects can be better established on large groups of people. After successfully completing Phase 3 trials and being safe to use, a vaccine can finally be approved for wide use and registered. After that, vaccines enter the so-called Phase 4, aka post-marketing trials. These establish the safety profile based on massive populations of people who get vaccinated, and this is where rare severe reactions can be determined. The gist of this last bit is to give you an idea that vaccines undergo years of trials before finally appearing on the market. For more information regarding the safety standards of every phase, you can find dozens of resources on how these trials are controlled. I'll even provide some in the description below. So, if you've been brainwashed into thinking vaccines don't go over quality control, I highly suggest you do some additional reading and research. New drugs, and especially vaccines, can take years to appear on the market. Let's get back to Corona again. It didn't take a long time for pharmacological companies to manufacture a vaccine. Several months to half a year until clinical trials began. To be fair, one of the primary reasons it was made so quickly is that we've already had a whole bunch of research done on coronavirus after the MERS outbreak in 2003. Normally, it would take a bit more than that to conduct proper research on the pathogen and its antigens, but with corona we've had a head start. Anyways, here's the point I actually want to make. It doesn't take long to manufacture a vaccine. The company representatives kept saying one important thing in all of their interviews. The main problem with making those vaccines widely available is actually government regulations. All of these shots have to undergo extensive clinical trials to prove that they're safe and effective. A lot of manufacturers said that the vaccine could be available as early as 2022. So it's at least 2 years of research, and this is actually incredibly fast for a new drug on the market, and especially a vaccine. Generally, it can take anywhere between 5 to 10 years for a new vaccine to be developed and included into a schedule. Again, it's not difficult for manufacturers to make a vaccine, it's difficult for them to prove that it's safe and effective. And it's the main reason they're having trouble putting their products on the market. If we actually had no regulations with clinical trials, there would already be dozens of coronavirus vaccines on the market. 5. Side effects. Each vaccine is unique, however a lot of them have similar common side effects. If there is anything specific you should look out for, I'll tell you when discussing individual diseases. Common side effects include injection site reaction, such as redness, swelling, and pain, fever, fatigue, headache, muscle and joint pain, vomiting, irritability. A rare side effect that can occur for any vaccine is anaphylaxis. It's a type of allergic reaction that can manifest with low blood pressure, signs of respiratory obstruction, and skin manifestations such as urticaria rash and allergic angioedema. Mind that, every allergic reaction occurs after contacting something for a second time. You can't develop an allergic reaction from contacting something the first time round. When it comes to allergies, it's common to be allergic to weak antigens which attack our body in low doses, such as pollen or pet fur. For whatever reason, these antigens don't induce a classic immune response, but a twisted one resulting in yet another type of immunoglobulin I didn't mention, type E. This immunoglobulin is responsible for the most severe allergic reactions and causes a completely counterproductive response from our immune system to a pathogen. The primary components of vaccines don't generally cause allergies. They're strong antigens designed to cause a strong response, and thus it's incredibly rare for allergies to develop. If there is an allergic reaction, it's generally an allergy to other components used to make the vaccine and preserve its biological activity. For example, to keep vaccines sterile, cheap and easy to make antibiotics are used, such as aminoglycosides. Traces of them often remain in the vaccine and cause an allergic reaction. Hence, sometimes you'll see things like allergic reaction to X, in this case scenario to aminoglycosides, as a contraindication to a specific vaccine. I'll be going in depth about each vaccine as we go along, as well as dedicate a separate video for discussing side effects in depth. Contraindications. A contraindication for any vaccine is severe allergic reactions to the previous dose or to any vaccine component. Immunodeficiency is a strict contraindication for some vaccines, and pregnancy is an issue for some vaccines, but not all of them. Everything else we'll cover later when talking about diseases. Next up, we're going to start looking at our diseases. We'll be going along a vaccination schedule, so the next video we're going to start with hepatitis B.